So welcome back to the Defiant Spirit. I'm Baruch Levy, also known as B, and I am delighted that you continue to join in with this conversation, all things Viktor Frankl, my teacher mentor, author of Man's Search for Meaning, father of logotherapy. I'm a logotherapist, along with the Enneagram, an ancient personality roadmap. I've created the Defy Your Number Enneagram system based on Viktor Frankl's work, and sprinkling in Kabbalah and other mystical traditions. Over the past few weeks, if you've been joining me, you have been listening to podcasts about the Enneagram at the movies and sharing with you how I've seen the Enneagram through movies and television shows and finding characters. They're part and parcel of my Defy Your Number program. So if you do the program with me, you get your number back, you get your ebook, and in the case of today, you would get back ebook number 7 if you're a 7, the Enthusiast. And these are some characters that I think are from or Enneagram 7s, but best guess, there's no science to this. Some of these, even as I'm looking at them, I could hear the case being made that there are other types. But I think the fun part is to go through the process of why to get to other people's types, to get to our own type, and not necessarily the static outcome. The process is just as important as the outcome. So if you haven't listened to the other 6, you can do that. You can just go back and listen, or you can watch. They're both video and audio. If you are listening, I will describe to you the characters, so you don't need to worry about that. And you can always download them over at defiantspirit.org //podcast. The bottom of the page, I upload them there. Or they're in your ebook when you do the program with me. Okay, Enneagram 7, the Enthusiast. Go back and listen to the Enneagram 7 podcast to learn more. But you get a good vibe for the 7 when you look at some of these pictures or you listen to who I'm about to describe. 7s are the most vibrant, energetic, optimistic. Sometimes they're called the optimists. I call them the enthusiasts because they're some of the most enthusiastic. They tend to be big personalities. They don't tend to be wallflowers. They can be, though it's rare that you're going to meet a reserved 7. Now, depending on the subtype, that's a whole other conversation, but it can happen. Doesn't mean all 7s are extroverted, but it means, I think, that they can flip a switch, whereas other types, they can't always flip the switch. 5s, 9s, they may not have that gear, but 7s can turn it up, and most of them don't have to work very hard. So who are some 7s? Oh man, there are so many 7s in pop culture, it's just not hard. There are other types that's not always easy to nail down or be certain about, but with 7s, not too hard. 7s, for me, I do mistype with 3s. So the performer, the achiever, and the enthusiast or the optimist, I mix up quite often until I get to know them. The motivation is very different, but the way it appears may not be. All right, let's start with some Enneagram 7s at the movies. Here's a famous one I imagine all of you have seen, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris Bueller is all 7. I don't think there's a question. He simply wants to experience life, right? If life is short, you better move fast or it'll pass you by. It's been like 10 years since I've seen it. Ferris Bueller is all about not being confined. 7s don't like limits. They're the ones who have FOMO. So you can feel it. I mean, Ferris just gets out there and experiences life and brings others along with him. It wouldn't have been the same movie if it was just Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because it was Ferris and his girlfriend, I forgot her name, and his buddy, Cameron Fry. The 3 of them are the ones who go out into the world and experience, all because Ferris makes it happen. 7s, they just have opportunities presented to them. I was talking to a woman whose daughter's a 7, and she has one daughter who's a 7 and one's a something else, 6 maybe. The 6 really struggles to make opportunities happen. The 7, it's like the universe just manifests whatever the 7 wants or needs. Now, actually, I should qualify that. The universe can manifest everything a 7 wants, but maybe not what they need. Because what they need sometimes is the discipline, is the rigor, is the boundaries, the borders. Look, if Ferris Bueller only took days off, right, he'd be kicked out of school, he'd be homeless. That ain't a great movie. But it's because he had the confines of school and people around him who kept him in check that day off was really special. 7s can slip though. They, when they get rid of those confines, when they get rid of the boundaries and borders and protective people in their lives who can help them say no, they can lose themselves. 7s are known to go down their passion, which is gluttony, and that's just excess. So 7s can get themselves in some deep trouble when they don't have that. But Ferris Bueller, great example of going out into the world, seeing it all, experiencing it all. Some other 7s. Robin Williams was a 7, and he plays lots of 7s. And in this case, he plays the quintessential 7, Peter Pan. I don't know if you remember him doing Peter Pan. It definitely wasn't one of his, maybe it was, I don't know, biggest hits. If it was, it wasn't my most memorable movie of him. But Peter Pan is a quintessential 7. I think if I have to pick one character from, movies or literature, it would be Peter Pan for the 7. Why? Because Peter Pan is the boy who never wants to grow up. He lives in Never Never Land. He just wants to play. He wants to fly. He wants to be free. He doesn't want to be limited, weighed down. I talked about this in a different video I did on Enneagram 7 and one particular movie, Big Fish. So you can watch that to learn more. But Enneagram 7s, reactive. Again, not when they're their highest self, their responsive self, the response able to respond, but the lower self really struggles with the shadows. And interestingly, in Peter Pan, the defining scene is when he's in Wendy's room, a mature adult, if you will, who helps ground him. And he's wrestling with his shadow, literally. He's trying to grab his shadow, and he's trying to make it stick with soap, but soap doesn't make, shadows stick. So Wendy offers to sew it on. So the work of a 7 is to own the shadow, own the suffering, own the deeper stuff, go deeper, not wider. And as you can see, lots of these characters struggle with going deep, being real. Peter Pan just wants to go out into Never Never Land and not grow up. You see it with lots of 7s. So who am I looking at here? I'm having a hard time focusing. There's another Robin Williams character up there from Mork. I don't remember the show, but it strikes me as a 7 show. No, how about what's his name? Elton John. Elton John's definitely a 7. And if you watch his movie, which was a great movie, Rocket Man, you can see the dangers of the excess and losing oneself, trying to experience too much, too quick, trying to see it all and do it all and be it all, and not really having a sense of self. And then he goes deeper. And that's, when he hits the point break, the shattering, as I call it, he starts to grow up. And that's what I see with 7s. I don't work with 7s until they've had a shattering. Shattering can be, I call them the dark Ds: divorce, disease, depression, death of a loved one. But until they hit that place, it's hard to pin down a 7 to get them to own their shadow. So you look at some of these characters in here, there's a theme. You see the guy, Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck. You see, what's his name from Cheers, Ted Danza. You see Hawkeye Pierce from MASH. You see, this is hard to recall all these names this quickly, but what's his name from Modern Family, Phil Dunphy. All got this vibe of surfacey, shallow, silly, funny, fun. Joey from Friends, Isaac from The Love Boat, right? I bet you haven't even seen a picture of Isaac in like 2 decades, but man, I haven't seen it either. But I just remember he was just a fun, look at his smile. Like, that's a 7 smile, and you can feel the energy and just good time. Isaac, right, coming through. Phoebe from Friends definitely got that 7 vibe. And so there's a lightness, there's a silliness. It's not coincidental that 7s make for great comedians. Some of the most well-known names of all time are 7 comedians, like Robin Williams. but it's a different type of a comedy. It's much lighter. It's much more surface versus like a 1, which is more of a Jerry Seinfeld, more of an angsty, or a 6 can be an angsty, or a counterphobic 6, the angry 6, which is more of like a, what's his name? I forget his name. George Carlin. So that's more of a hard edge. But 7, again, a lighter, funnier, slapstick. All these guys in here that I just named have that fun and silly quality. So Enneagram 7s at the movies. Some of these I haven't seen before. I'll just rattle off some of them. Shameless, the dad from Shameless. You can feel like doesn't want to be pinned down, doesn't want to be responsible. That's the big word for 7s. Can they take responsibility for their life and have fun, but check the boxes that need to be checked while doing it? And so you see the gluttony piece in him. It's been a long time since I saw Shameless, but nonetheless, you see it in, who else? You see it in the guy from Game of Thrones, the little person, I forgot his name in it, but he is a drunk, right? Until he starts to grow up, until he starts to take responsibility. And then you can see a strength, right? And 7s have a deep reservoir of strength. When I work with 7s, it's almost like they don't believe they're capable of facing or enduring the suffering, the adversity, the darkness. And so they stay light, they stay at the surface. But when life challenges them, they can rise to the occasion. Some of these characters don't. Some of them, like the Shameless guy, just keep going down the gluttony hole. But many of them, certainly the ones I work with, come to me and they're ready to grow up, to own their shadow, to face the hard stuff. I mean, I think about Robin Williams, just the painfulness of the fact that he killed himself, laughing on the outside, crying on the inside, right? And 7s tend to either avoid the darkness, the difficult conversations, or escape from it, or just make light. You know, I have to remind 7s that I don't need them to be funny, because sometimes they'll make jokes, and there's a difference between making a joke because you want to engage versus making a joke because you want to avoid. And 7s really have to stand guard against that joke quality. All right, I'm looking at Ted here from the movie Ted, the inappropriate teddy bear. By the way, I didn't know Ted was inappropriate the first time I watched it with my son, who's now age appropriate, but at the time, I don't know, he was like 8 or something, and I didn't see any previews for it. And we watched it, and the opening scene is way inappropriate, and I'm like, holy shit, this is not your average teddy bear. Well, 7s, I mean, Ted is a 7. He just wants to have fun. He wants his buddy, who's Mark Wahlberg, I forgot the name of the movie, but he just wants his buddy to not grow up, to not settle down. 7s can be a bad influence, that bachelor party kind of thing. And Mark Wahlberg's character is torn because his buddy 7, his buddy Ted is a 7 who's constantly pulling him to smoke bongs and to party and to do wild things. And oh my God, this is a 7 unhinged. I'm not sure Ted grows up by the end of the movie, but he is a teddy bear after all. But there's a sweet, endearing quality that just makes this a complex character. 7, The Mask, is Jim Carrey. He's another comedian that's a 7, plays a 7. And I've talked a lot about Jim Carrey. I won't go too deep into it. I think I've done podcasts on Jim Carrey. He's a 7 who had a shattering. His girlfriend completed suicide 5 years ago, and it really broke Carrey, or it was his ex-girlfriend, but whatever it was, that was his dark D. That was his moment of reckoning, and he chose to go deeper. I think he had a break for a while. He went into some depression, but he came out the other side as an artist, really transformed. He's still funny, but not in a slapsticky way, not in an all the time kind of a way. And The Mask, the movie The Mask that he's playing the part in this slide, you know, it's funny until you can't take the mask off. And I think that's the work of a 7, is to know that it's just a role they're playing. It's a mask they're wearing, and that they have to have places and spaces and times where they can remove the mask to be real, to remember that they aren't their mask. They're just wearing a mask. And so Jim Carrey is a really great case study in somebody, a 7, who's done the work, had the shattering, and defied his number to access all those numbers. So many Enneagram 7s in cinema and movies. I would love to hear your feedback, your 7s that you think maybe that shouldn't be on here, that should be on here. Make the case why. That's always the most important point. It's easy to say somebody is a 7, but it's not always so easy to make the case. And that's the educational component of all this and why we do it. So maybe this helps you find your number. Maybe it helps you know I'm certainly not that number. Whatever it is, you're here to discover and defy all your numbers so you can live your spirit. I will see you or talk to you in the next podcast. Until then, defy your number and live your spirit.